Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Matters That Matter. I'm Simran, and I'm in a conversation with my mentor, Susie Singh. Susie, there's a growing awareness now about how womb experiences can have lifelong effects on people. And one of our viewers who has recently conceived and is ready to enter motherhood sent us a question asking you how she can manage the womb experience of her unborn fetus.
Well, this is a very fascinating area of interest. And I'm really grateful that somebody has asked this question because I think this needs increasing understanding of what really happens in the womb. Interestingly enough, I think our grandmothers always knew it, and it's been talked about through the generations. But the focus was primarily on the physicality. So pregnant mothers were told to keep, the image of a lovely child or a Krishna and to look at the image every day so they'd have a really good looking or a handsome or a beautiful baby.
Yeah.
But very little regard was given to the mental and psychological impact upon that fetus in the womb during that 9 months that it is in utero. And increasing research has indicated that all the mother's feelings, thoughts, experiences, her attitude towards the pregnancy, it has an impact on that child. And therefore, it becomes very important to monitor her pregnancy experience, which is probably why the grandmother said that, a pregnant woman should be taken care of and kept happy, and she needs to blossom during that period. Now, we were talking more about a psychological blossoming, not so much of a blossoming only in the physical sense, perhaps.
Mhm.
Of course, she needs to take care of her diet, but equally important is to take care of the psychological development of that growing life inside of her. Now, the first most important thing, I think, based on the experiences of many people who have regressed to their womb experiences, is that a lot of gender discrimination
Mhm.
creates a lifelong impact upon that fetus. In a country like
Yeah.
India, where we've always been obsessed about having a male child, if there is any pressure on the mother to conceive a male child by the family, or if she has a personal desire for that, or if her acceptance in the family depends upon producing a male child, then that can create a lot of mental pressure upon the mother. So
Yeah.
the first thing is, can the mother have a complete degree of neutrality towards the gender of the child? And while the lip service is often done, where all we want is the child should be healthy and well, but very often there's subliminal undercurrents of a gender preference. And I think it's very important that this be brought out in the open, and particularly the father of that unborn child should really be pro either gender. So, regardless
Mhm.
of whether the incoming child is going to be a daughter or a son, both should be welcomed with equal enthusiasm. I think that has a huge impact on the mother if the mother feels that the father is really supportive. Because very often there can be familial pressures from the in laws or from the
Yeah.
extended family. But if the father is supportive, that can be taken care of to a very large degree. In cases where the mother herself is not wanting to proceed with the pregnancy, now, we find a lot of cases where the pregnancy is unplanned and therefore it comes as a complete surprise to the mother.
Yeah.
And she may be going through this internal dilemma about whether she wants to proceed with that pregnancy or not. And I would like to urge women who are in that conflict, and it is a very, very personal choice. But if you're in that conflict and there is a probability that you are going to keep the baby, and I'm assuming there is a high enough probability because you're still debating it, then you must try and shorten the period of that confusion, because if you decide to proceed with the pregnancy, the child is listening to your thoughts. The child is listening to the fact that maybe the child was unwanted. And that then creates feelings of rejection, of not belonging, of a sense of insecurity, of not being safe with the parent, and then all sorts of coping mechanisms which are approval seeking from the parent. Those tend to develop in the child, if impacting the child's confidence and sense of belonging in the family.
Mm-hmm.
So these are natural, these are everyday things, and there is no judgment about whether or not what you decide, but we must always keep in mind that this confusion is impacting the child. So can
Right.
we arrive at whatever decision we want by speaking to the caretakers, the medical experts, the your own spouse in a very loving way, and being mindful about the impact on the child. So, at the psychological level, this is the first most important thing. The second thing is it's very important during the pregnancy to avoid all kinds of conflict and violence. Now, the violence could be, it's understood that there should be no physical violence, but very often what is harder to avoid is verbal violence.
Mm-hmm.
Misunderstandings, fights, and they can really have a disturbing impact on the fetus, which is listening to the parents disagreeing or fighting. And sometimes those fights could be about the child. And in the regression experiences that I've had with clients, I have found that those are sometimes remembered verbatim in deep hypnosis. So the child remembers what the conflict was about. And the child can then get an impression that I am the cause of my parents' conflicts. And that creates its own sets of problems. So try and keep the period, the pregnancy period, as harmonious as possible, and to try and limit the kind of conflict. And I think here it's very useful if the father is listening in also, because while the mother is going through so much hormonal changes, a greater degree of understanding is going to be required from the father to be supportive during this period. Also, it's important to avoid all kinds of violent media. So, watching movies that have violent content is very important to avoid, because children can't really tell the difference between reality and what they're seeing on the screen, and the mother's psychological state is also impacted by watching violent media. So it's important to stay away from that sort of thing and actually watch things which are more humorous or lighthearted or family dramas and stuff that is actually has a positive impact on the mother's psyche too. The third thing is, if there are any fears, particularly in first time mothers, if there are any fears related to the pregnancy or the delivery, then these must be in a very gentle way discussed with the primary caretaker, because unfortunately there's again a lot of media which shows some very nasty birthing scenes, and those can create a lot of fear for the to-be mother. And I think it's important to address those fears and put them to ease, reassuring the mother that she'll be taken care of in the best possible way, and that there is a solution to every kind of concern that she has, and which is why she must discuss it with her doctor or her gynecologist. There is then the question of what is it that you want to feed the baby with psychologically.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where it becomes important. What are you doing during the course of your day? What are you imbibing your thoughts with? What kind of material are you reading or studying? And therefore, it's preferable if you are reading some sacred scriptures. If you'd like to chant, then the Gayatri Mantra is proven to be very effective because the mantra talks about bringing about the radiance or the radiance of a sun and the knowledge of the sun within your own self, and that gets transferred to the child. That understanding, prayers, whenever there is a fear that is arising in the mother's mind, she can always pray and seek strength to bring peace to her own mind and reassurance to the developing fetus. There is also the very valuable input of developing family connection with the fetus in the womb. And this can be done very effectively by giving your unborn child in womb name. So you are actually calling that child by a certain name, and it could just be a fun name, an endearing name. And you speak to the child every single day. The mother should establish loving communication with the child, informing the child how welcome the child is in her life and how much and how dearly the child is loved, and all sorts of self-affirming, loving, welcoming kind of conversation needs to happen. There is also the father can get very involved with this process through tactile and touch therapy, which is massaging the womb, and that develops the father's connection with the child, and again saying loving things to the baby in the womb. In addition, it has been found that if you can put headphones or listen to classical music, Bach, Beethoven, or even Indian classical, that develops the mathematical mind of the child, and those children are seen to excel in mathematics. So that is again something which is useful to do. I think it's very important to create this little joyful experience during the pregnancy so that the child feels that it's entering into a world where it is greatly welcomed and it can look forward to those experiences, and to minimize any form of external conflict or distress to the mother. So broadly, these are the things that are very important as womb care for the to-be mother and the child.
So, Susie, like you mentioned in the beginning, that often our attitudes and belief systems are something that the child imbibes while still in the womb. You mentioned this in regards to the gender issues we have, especially in our society. So, and you also said that a lot of times these are not conscious in people. They're not even aware that they have these biases and expectations. So for somebody who has conceived or somebody who's planning to conceive, how can they prepare themselves mentally and work on themselves to have more sort of awareness of why and where they're coming from?
I think that's a very important question. And unfortunately, a lot of conception in the country happens without preparation. So, it's a large quantum of pregnancies are unplanned, and therefore they can be distressing in themselves. So planning the pregnancy is the first thing. And the second aspect is preparing for the pregnancy. So besides detoxing at a physical level and preparing the body for the changes that are going to happen, I think it's very important for the parents to sit down and talk about what it means to become a parent. Are they ready psychologically to take on that responsibility? I don't think a lot of parents, it's just the next natural step after you're married. And mindlessly, you just think, okay, maybe it's time to have a family, but you're bringing a new life in. Are you ready? And part of that question is, do we have a gender bias? You don't choose the gender of your child. You can only accept the gender of your child. And therefore, that dialogue needs to happen so that you can arrive at a neutral acceptance before you conceive. But of course, we are expecting this to happen in families which are fairly evolved and which seek this kind of conversation. It is not something that is commonly discussed. The only thing that's discussed is it's time to have a baby in most families. And I think a common error that is made is particularly if the couple is going through some sort of marital discord, babies are brought in thinking they're going to resolve the discord. And, if they have a child and if they have to have that added responsibility, perhaps they will become more responsible and think about the child and not so much about their conflicts. But I think that doesn't apply in today's very self absorbed generations. It may have been true in the yesteryears, at the time of maybe one or two generations ago, but I think the reality is very different today, and we have to change with the times. If there is marital discord, it may be preferable for them to seek other solutions and go for marriage counseling and not expect bringing a baby into the world as a solution.
So, touching on what you just said, if very briefly you could tell us what the ideal intent should be when one decides to have a baby. Why should one have a baby?
I think at a time when you start feeling a motherly instinct,
Mm,
when a woman starts feeling a motherly instinct, it's more natural for the woman. And sometimes it comes very naturally to the father too. That, men who are very fond of kids, they may experience it even before their spouse can experience it. But it is a general readiness to embrace new life. And the child must be an extension of their love, not something that they need to tick off on a job list, because if we don't have this child, the world is going to talk about our, it's going to become a social media thing, or it's going to become a society conversation. That shouldn't be the motivation. Or, the relatives are going to ask why you haven't had a child. And these are very real issues. I have
mm.
clients who, for the longest, have wanted, their only motivation to conceive has been, people are asking us, we've been married 6 years and why haven't we had a child yet? So these are real concerns, and I think increasingly this generation needs to understand that some things are very private and personal. For example, asking a young boy or a girl when they're getting married is probably not the right thing to ask in this to of this generation, or asking a married couple when they plan to have a baby. So these are the new sets of rules. And yes, it was different years ago, but these are the new rules, and we have to adapt because everybody has their own choice about how they want to live their lives, whether they want to have a child and they don't want to have a child. And much as this is a very um, hard statement, and I'm willing to stick my neck out and make that statement. But if you don't feel ready to have a child, it's better not to have one, because you're not going to make the best parent to that incoming soul. And therefore, emotionally, psychologically, financially, you must feel a sense of readiness, to bear the child and to nurture that child and to give off yourself to that incoming child. And of course, we'll all make mistakes, every parent does, but at least they are not made for the lack of intent.
Mhm.
So the intent must be, I really want to have a baby because I'm ready to nurture.
Right. I think one of the most important points to be taken from this video is that along with financial readiness, emotional and psychological readiness is very important for potential parents. Thank you so much, Susie, for shedding light on this and answering this question so beautifully. If you like this video and found this helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to this page. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.